The Guardian is reporting this afternoon that Peter Mandelson failed his security vetting clearance, but the decision was overruled by the Foreign Office to ensure that he could take up his post to be the ambassador to the United States.
Either he knew that Mandelson failed the security vetting and lied to us in Parliament, on TV repeatedly, or he didn't know, didn't ask, and said that he had passed the security vetting, which means that he is hopelessly incompetent. Either way, he should go.
Keir Starmer is in huge trouble as explosive accusations and political chaos erupt across Westminster. MPs are now openly demanding his resignation as a shocking scandal raises serious questions about trust, power, and accountability at the very top. This is not just pressure. It is a full-blown political storm that could shake his leadership to the core.
He was initially denied security vetting, according to The Guardian, in late January 2025. On the 30th of January of that year, he was confirmed as being security cleared. So at some point, someone in that final week of January, according to The Guardian, made the point to overrule what the security services said.
According to The Guardian report, Peter Mandelson failed the highest level of UK security vetting. And this isn't a minor check. This is developed vetting, the strictest clearance process the UK has, where intelligence services look into everything from personal history to potential vulnerabilities like blackmail risk. Normally, if you fail that, the process ends there. Full stop. But in this case, it didn't end.
They say that Peter Mandelson failed a developed vetting process check. Now, a developed vetting process is controlled by the Cabinet Office. It's a process which sort of officials are subject to confidential but very detailed background checks.
What makes it even more serious is that despite that failure, he still went on to become UK ambassador to the United States. And when I look at the timeline, that's where things start to feel very hard to ignore.
So Peter Mandelson, we're told, failed that in late January of last year.
Wow.
Now, the significance of this date in late January is that Sir Keir Starmer had already announced Peter Mandelson as the new UK ambassador to the US by that point.
Because he failed the vetting in late January 2025, but by that point, Keir Starmer had already publicly announced him for the role. So the political decision was already out in the open before the security system had even finished its judgment.
Then after that, according to The Guardian, Foreign Office officials used a rarely used authority to override the recommendation.
Then something unusual happens. Instead of the process stopping, it gets overridden. Not because he passed in the normal sense, but because a rarely used authority inside the Foreign Office is reportedly used to overturn the result. And just like that, the appointment moves forward anyway. By February, it's officially confirmed.
Fast forward to last September, when the PM was defending Peter Mandelson. He's told MPs then that full due process was gone through. Now, this is the political difficulty for Sir Keir Starmer.
So if I break it down simply, the sequence is uncomfortable. First, a failure, then a public appointment, then an override, then confirmation. That's not a normal flow for something as sensitive as a top diplomatic post in Washington. And this is exactly where the political pressure starts building. Because developed vetting exists for a reason. It's meant to protect the state from risk at the highest level. It is not symbolic. It is meant to stop exactly this kind of situation, where someone considered unsuitable by security standards still ends up in a position of major influence.
This decision was made in late January 2025, so it seems under Ollie Robbins' watch this decision was made. And that's, as I say, the big question is, was there any oversight? Was this just made by officials?
So when I hear that a rarely used authority was used to override that decision, my immediate question is simple. Who actually made that call? Was it civil servants inside the Foreign Office acting on their own? Was it senior officials trying to smooth over a political problem? Or did it go higher than that, with political pressure influencing a security decision? Right now, that part is unclear, and that uncertainty is what makes the story so explosive. And this is where Kemi Badenoch steps in and turns it into a direct political accusation. She's not just questioning the appointment, she's saying Keir Starmer misled Parliament. That matters a lot more than standard political criticism, because in UK politics, misleading Parliament is treated as a serious breach of the ministerial code. In some cases, it can become a resignation-level issue.
He was relying on the vetting process as his defence. It looked like the vetting process was ignored. This is hugely serious, and I think he will probably have to go.
The reason this is gaining traction is because of what Starmer previously said. He stated that full due process was followed and that vetting was carried out independently. But if the vetting actually resulted in a failure first and only later got overridden, then that version of events starts to look incomplete at best and misleading at worst. And I think that's why this is escalating so fast. It's no longer just about Mandelson or even the appointment itself. It's about whether Parliament was given the full picture at the time decisions were being defended. Because once that trust breaks, it doesn't stay contained. It spreads upward. People start asking what else wasn't fully disclosed, who signed off on what, and how far up the chain this actually goes. And from where I'm standing, the most uncomfortable part isn't just that a vetting decision was overridden. It's that we still don't know who decided it was acceptable to override it in the first place. This is where I think the situation starts to get genuinely politically dangerous, because the official statements and the reported facts don't sit neatly together anymore. Back in September, I remember Keir Starmer saying very clearly that full due process was followed. Then in February, the message was repeated again in different wording, that the vetting was independent and thorough. Those are not casual phrases. Those are meant to close the argument completely and signal that everything was done properly from start to finish. But now, when I look at what the Guardian report is saying, the timeline feels very different. And what stands out to me most is the sequence of events. The failure reportedly happened in late January 2025. By that point, Starmer had already publicly announced him for the ambassador role. Then instead of the process ending there, a rarely used authority inside the Foreign Office was reportedly used to override the result. After that, the appointment continued and was formally confirmed in February. So when I line it up like that, I see a direct conflict. On one side, a failed vetting outcome. On the other side, public statements about full due process and independent and thorough checks. And that naturally raises a difficult question. Were those statements fully accurate in the way they were presented?
Ministers who knowingly mislead Parliament will be expected to offer their resignation. It says that was signed off by the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, in October 2025. It's of paramount importance, it says.
In UK politics, that question is not small. If Parliament is given an incomplete or misleading version of events, it can quickly become a ministerial code issue. And that is why opposition figures like Kemi Badenoch are now focusing heavily on whether Parliament was actually told everything at the time. At this point, I find myself asking a very simple question. Who actually knew what, and when did they know it?
About what would constitute misleading the House here.
Yes.
Now, if the Prime Minister stands up and says that Peter Mandelson passed his vetting, he might, in the letter of the law, be right at that point that he had subsequently passed it because this little used authority had been invoked by Foreign Office officials.
There are a few possible explanations. One is that officials acted alone and used an override mechanism without political involvement. But honestly, given the sensitivity of a US ambassador appointment, that feels like a very hard scenario to accept without further evidence.
Can you honestly get away with suggesting that he passed his vetting the second time of asking? In fact, didn't even pass it. It was overridden to allow him to take up his job.
Another possibility is that senior Foreign Office leadership was involved in the decision. That would place responsibility inside the department itself possibly around figures like Sir Ollie Robbins, depending on how the chain of command worked.
The fact that he failed the vetting. They haven't yet made a decision, but the authority lies with them as the entity who actually carried out the vetting checks.
But what's really important here is...
And then there is the most politically sensitive possibility that someone closer to number 10 was aware of what was happening, or even indirectly involved in the decision-making process. That is where the pressure really starts to rise, because it moves the issue closer to the Prime Minister himself. For me, the most important missing detail is timing. When exactly did Keir Starmer know that the vetting had failed? Was it before the override, after the override, or only after the appointment was already in motion? That single detail changes the entire meaning of the story.
Actually, in the round, examining the fact that Peter Mandelson was initially denied that he failed his vetting.
And when I look at Mandelson's appointment itself, I can't ignore the fact that he was not a neutral figure. He is widely described as politically controversial, with what people in Westminster often call baggage. Reports also suggest that within parts of the Foreign Office, there was preference for a career diplomat instead, someone without political controversy or reputational risk. Despite that, the appointment went ahead.
And going forward, this issue about him failing the vetting, according to The Guardian, and this is really interesting, the Cabinet Office is currently examining whether to redact that information about the fact that he failed the vetting. They haven't yet made a decision, but the authority lies with them.
Now I also see attention shifting toward documents. Around 146 pages have already been released, but key details still appear unclear or missing. There are even suggestions that the Cabinet Office is considering whether to redact the fact that the vetting failure happened at all, which immediately raises questions about transparency. And with another batch of documents expected, including internal messages and decision chains, I think the pressure is only going to increase from here. What I'm seeing is a government facing what insiders describe as systemic failure. Scandals are stacking up early in the term, and instead of slowing down, they are feeding into each other. Critics argue the leadership promised integrity, but is now delivering instability, with growing tension between civil servants and political appointees over how decisions are being handled.
It's not quite lying, but it's not telling the whole truth, is it? Missing the bit about failing the vetting. So really angry about it.
Kemi Badenoch is now framing this as deliberate deception, repeatedly accusing Keir Starmer of misleading Parliament and turning a procedural issue into a direct challenge to his credibility. That shifts the focus from process to leadership responsibility. The ministerial code adds pressure. Knowingly misleading Parliament is a resignation-level issue, but the key dispute is whether Starmer had full awareness or relied on officials. At the core is a bigger concern, whether security advice was overridden for political reasons, raising risks around intelligence, diplomacy, and trust in the system. Outcomes now depend on evidence, survival, resignation pressure, or prolonged damage as more documents and questions emerge.